Hey, what's up guys, Murderman4 here, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Pyramid at the End of the World, which is episode 7 of series 10. So of course this episode is the second part of a three-part story in the middle of series 10, featuring the monks. It's been known as the Monk Trilogy, and so obviously in Extremis we were introduced to the monks, and here we get to see their plan fold out in a lot more detail, and of course it ends on a cliffhanger leading into the Lie of the Land. And I thought that this episode was very good. It's probably one of the most intense episodes that we've had possibly ever, and the stakes are really, really high. The options are basically total enslavement of humanity or total destruction of humanity. So of course the episode begins with a previously sequence, but this one's a little bit different from what we've seen before. It's both previously and it's integrated with now, as Bill is recounting what happened in the past episode to Penny, who you might remember was in the simulation in the previous episode. And so here, of course, is her real life date with Penny. And this is a really unique way of doing the previously sequence. We've never seen something like this before. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I prefer the traditional previously, but I can see why they did it, and it worked well in the context of the episode. And then of course Bill's day gets interrupted by the Secretary General, I think, of the UN, and it's concerning the Doctor, who's once again given the title the President of Earth. I'm not sure how I feel about this exactly. I wasn't a huge fan of it in when it was first introduced in Death in Heaven. I think here it works well, and it's explained that he only takes this role officially when there is a crisis. But it makes sense that over time the leaders of humanity have come to know about the Doctor and the works that he's done. But at the same time, I kind of think it takes away from the magic of the Doctor being, you know, a more subtle character. People don't know about his actions. He does it without recognition for it. But my main problem is I find it a bit difficult to believe that all of these leaders would have such trust in the Doctor that he would become leader of all the forces on Earth, especially because pretty much none of these people would ever have met the Doctor. So it's a little bit of a stretch, I think, to put that much trust in him, no matter what his reputation is. But I digress. Here we're introduced to the main problem of the episode. A 5,000-year-old pyramid has showed up overnight, and this is a really intriguing concept. We don't actually get an explanation as to how, but honestly I'm not really bothered by it, because these monks are shown later to be extremely powerful creatures, and we'd already seen previously in Extremis their ability to create such a realistic simulated world of the entirety of Earth's history. And so I don't think it's outside of the monks' boundaries to be able to do such a thing. The pyramid location doesn't take all the focus of the episode though. We also have the agrofuel lab center or whatever, and this is where a massive part of this plot comes into play, where they're mixing some sort of genetic modification chemicals. And we see a very small but very important detail when we see the woman, I think Erica, walks out of her house and her glasses get smashed, which of course leads into the devastating effects that we see later. But anyways, the way that this is done, I don't understand it. Why does she just leave her bag in the door? It doesn't make any sense. You couldn't have had it like she accidentally drops her reading glasses and steps on them. She puts her bag in the door and then they get smashed. I don't know. The reason was a little bit nonsensical. I like the concept behind it, that such a puny thing would end up leading to the destruction of the entire world. That's a great concept. But the way that it was executed here just seemed really stupid and illogical. So that was just a little bit weird for me. Anyways, the Doctor has been called in by the UN to figure this out. One question, why is the UN involved here but not UNIT? UNIT gets a couple of mentions later on, but they never make an appearance, which seems really weird for an event like this. And it's strange to see the United Nations in this, because previously, you know, they haven't really had much of a presence in the show, and yet now we're having the UN instead of UNIT. Anyways, the Doctor is called in, and of course throughout the episode his blindness causes problems. Obviously there's the big thing at the end that I'm going to save for later, but a couple of moments that I really like throughout, because they're just so subtle, but they show how much more difficult it is for the Doctor, even with his sonic shades. You know, you've got the moment where the Secretary General holds up like the iPad with the information on it, and the Doctor says, "Why don't you tell me in your own words?" Or when the light bursts out of the pyramid, he doesn't turn to look until she says anything, because he wouldn't notice. And it's just subtle details like that that make it more real and make it seem more grounded. Although I will say a couple of times throughout the episode, I was feeling like he wasn't that blind, just because of the ease that he moves around. And I understand he has the sonic shades, which obviously make it so much easier for him. But at the same time, I just feel like if he's blind, he shouldn't be, sauntering about like he normally would, even with the shades on. He should at least be a little bit more cautious about it, I would think. Anyways, it gets established that this pyramid has appeared in the middle of the three largest armies in the world, the Chinese army, the Russian army, and the American army, and it's obviously some sort of crisis point. And then all the clocks in the world turn into the doomsday clock. And so this is a really interesting concept, which of course the monks are using to try to get humanity to consent to their taking over. Anyways, let's talk more about the monks. Obviously we see a lot more of them in this episode. Their presence isn't quite as creepy as it was in Extremis, but their appearance is still magnificently terrifying. They're disgusting and they're just so well designed. I love it, and their voices are amazing too. And they're not used sparingly in this episode, they're all throughout it, and we get to see that these are really powerful creatures. Not only do they have this massive simulation, but when all the armies try to attack the pyramid as a show of strength, they can't do anything to the pyramid because it has this kind of like tractor beam or something, I guess, that just takes out the weapons. And then they say they're ready to talk, so the leaders of the armies, the Doctor, Bill, Nardole, they all go in to find out what all this is about. And the concept of these monks is a really, really interesting one. They want to invade Earth, they want to rule the planet, but they don't want to do it out of fear. They want to be loved, which is something that we haven't quite seen in a villain before. Every other species that's tried to take over Earth, it's always been for some sort of generally evil reason. Like they want money, or they want power, or they just simply want to enslave the human race. But here, these monks, they want to be loved, which is something that is obviously seen as a good thing. And the monks say that they will protect humanity forever, which the Doctor quips comes at a cost, and it'll be the last free choice they ever make. And the monks show everyone in there what is going to happen to the Earth in a year's time, and they say that they can prevent this from happening. And so of course the humans are like, okay, we need to side with these monks so that they can save us. And the Doctor of course is saying no, but they just have to consent, and the monks say if your consent isn't pure, then you will die. And then the UN Secretary General gets killed because his consent was out of fear and not out of love. It's just so interesting that this species has such a specific need, and any reason other than that is unacceptable. And of course later we also see the military leaders decide that they're going to consent, but the monks decide that they consented out of strategy, not out of love, and so they kill them as well. And the killing effect is really neat too. It's like they turn into dust, but not just a pile of dust. It's like an outer shell breaks off first, and then they kind of disintegrate. It's a really neat effect. Meanwhile, while all this is going on at the agro-fuel place, there's a guy who's suffering from a hangover, and then there's the woman from earlier, Erica, who since her glasses are broken, she can't put in the numbers for the mixture of whatever formula or whatever they're doing. And so she asks the guy to, but since he's kind of suffering from a hangover, he puts the wrong decimal place, and it basically just screws everything up. And yeah, so once again, simple actions like the breaking of her glasses lead to completely dire consequences. And this, of course, is the event that the monks are referring to that will lead to the destruction of all life on Earth. But back in Tremezistan, which I forgot to mention earlier, that's where the pyramid is, everyone there is thinking that it's because of the war zone. And so they try to stop the Doomsday Clock by deciding to team up and not fight each other, but nothing happens. The Doomsday Clock is now at 11:59, and it does nothing, which leads them to deduce that it cannot possibly be the war that leads to this, but something else, something more subtle. And I really like this because the monks did this really strategically. They put their pyramid there as a way of misdirection, because everyone, of course, naturally assumed that it would be World War III that would end the world. Of course, this is to the monks' advantage because they want humanity to consent, because if they can figure out what's wrong and fix it, then they're not going to want to consent to the monks. Eventually they narrow it down and figure out it must be some sort of bacteria thing. And of course the Doctor is saying you cannot consent to these monks under any circumstances. I really like this scene where the humans stand up and tell the Doctor that it's their planet and their decision. They think that they're going to save the world by doing this. Of course they end up failing. Back at the labs again, Erica and the other guy go in to check on the plants, and then they start dying. Before this happens, I don't know why he does this. He removes his little protective helmet thingy. He says it's because he's going to be sick. But, you know, there's a reason they wear them in there. So you'd think if he's going to be sick, he would leave the area before taking it off, because then he could potentially get contaminated with something, which does, of course, end up happening. so it's just a little bit dumb. And then the guy scoops out some of this material from these disintegrated plants just with an open container, and he runs out the airlocks and leaves them open. And it's just like, are you kidding me? Humanity dies because this guy's stupid. Obviously you want to be able to examine it, but that's not the way to do it. That's not professional at all. That just seemed like a really reckless, stupid thing to do. You could have contained it, but because of the way he did things, it's just, once again, kind of like the way the glasses were done. It just seems pretty illogical. And you think that somebody working with such chemicals like this, they'd be a bit more cautious about these procedures. The Doctor and Nardole have narrowed down where this place is. They arrive to try to figure it out, and it turns out that they can't contain it. There's nothing they can do to contain it because the vents will automatically filter out the bacteria and put it into the atmosphere. What I think is really interesting is that Nardole gets affected by this bacteria. Previously we thought he might have been an android. Now it appears he's made up of like both mechanical and more organic parts in the body, so he's a lot more of a cyborg than we thought. But I just think it's interesting that he gets affected because now he's going to end up going out of the lab. Is that going to cause this chemical, whatever it is, to create an outbreak? Obviously at the end of the episode he's seen lying on the TARDIS floor, not dead obviously because we see him in future episodes, but incapacitated. And so does the Doctor have some sort of magic thing to get him healed? Likewise, the Doctor doesn't get affected at all, which I think is a little strange. Yes, he's a Time Lord and obviously would have more resistance to it, but if this substance is powerful enough to wipe out all life on Earth, how is he able to survive completely unaffected without any sort of protection? That's just a little bit far-fetched for me. Anyways, he decides that the only thing he can do is to blow up the whole facility, which will destroy all the bacteria. Which normally I wouldn't take issue with, except this is the third time this season where his solution has been blowing everything up. We had that in Smile with the city before he discovered that the colonists were already there, and we also had that in Oxygen before he revealed what his true plan was. So I know that wasn't technically his real plan, but it was what his plan was appeared to be, and then now here, his thing is to blow it all up. Also, another gripe about the blowing up thing, the Doctor sets the timer to 2 minutes, but it takes a lot longer for it to go off than 2 minutes. There's a point where Erica is telling him he has 1 minute 20 seconds left, and I'm pretty sure it's at least 3 or 4 minutes after that it finally goes off. Just for reference, this is the point where it should have blown up, if it was actually happening in real time.
Can you hear me?
So I suppose that the editing was just a little bit off there. Of course, when they're filming it, they have no idea how long it's going to be in its final edited form. But perhaps 2 minutes was a little bit on the low side. They could have gone for a little bit longer and made it make a bit more sense. Anyways, Erica gets out of the area alright, but the Doctor is left on the other side and he needs to do the combination to get out. Only problem is, since he's blind, he can't see, and since it isn't the screen, the numbers are actually printed on a physical thing, he can't actually see what the numbers are. So he can't get out, which I think was a really super intense moment. I loved the ending of this episode. I know a couple of things throughout this I thought were a little bit illogical, but the ending was so intense. And I certainly didn't expect it to get resolved the way it did. I had no idea how he was going to get out of this, and I honestly feared for the Doctor's life during this scene because there's nothing he could do. He's just desperately trying to turn the numbers, but he can't see them, and then he admits that he's still blind. To which Bill, who actually has authority to consent for humanity to the monks because of her connection with the Doctor, asks the monks if they can heal his blindness. They say yes, and so she decides to consent because she knows that the Earth needs the Doctor. So the Doctor's blindness gets healed this way. I did not expect that. I thought it was going to be healed next week with the regeneration that we've seen in trailers and stuff, but no, it's by the monks. And so we got about 2.5 episodes of the blindness. I thought it was a really enjoyable hindrance to the Doctor. I find it really hard to believe that this episode and Extremis were both originally written without the Doctor's blindness in it, because it's such a focal point in both. But the Doctor's able to get through, blows up all the bacteria, crisis averted, but of course there's consequences. Again, I love the consequences. Consequences for saving Bill, the Doctor gets blind. Consequences for his blindness being solved, humanity gets taken over. And the monks agree that her consent is pure because she does it out of love. Granted, it's not love for them, it's love for the Doctor, but it's love nonetheless. And the episode ends with the Doctor devastated that Bill has handed over the Earth to the monks. But yeah, what a cliffhanger. We see in the next time trailer that the monks have completely overrun the Earth, and it looks really intense next week. We have Missy back, which I'm really happy to be able to see. The things that were teased in Extremis going to hopefully be paid off in The Lie of the Land, and it looks like Bill is going to be shooting the Doctor because the Doctor has changed sides, which I'm really excited to see. It looks like it's going to be a great final act. But anyways, back to the pyramid at the end of the world. Yeah, a really intense episode. Despite a couple minor niggles, I thought it was really well done. Suitably epic. The monks are a great villain, and I hope that they continue to be such a big threat in the Lie of the Land, and their presence doesn't diminish at all. And so I think I'm going to give the pyramid at the end of the world an 8 out of 10. Yeah, second best of the season. Even though I don't think I can fully judge it, as I said, in extremis, because it's part of a bigger story. And that brings my Series 10 average to 7.64 out of 10. Also, one other thing, this isn't to do with the pyramid at the end of the world, this is more to do with extremis, but personally, I feel like we didn't need Extremis. Extremis was an enjoyable episode, but after watching the pyramid at the end of the world, I felt like we didn't need a full episode before. If just a few lines of dialogue were added to the episode, then everything could have been explained away fine. I enjoyed Extremis, but this episode makes me feel like it was kind of useless, and so that's not anything against either of the individual episodes, but it might affect the story as a whole. I'm glad it's a 3-parter, gives it a bit more time to breathe, but perhaps the first part could have been utilized a little bit better. Anyways, those are my thoughts and opinions on the pyramid at the end of the world. Really enjoying this story so far. Really hope that the Lie of the Land lives up to the first 2 episodes. But anyways, what did you think of the pyramid at the end of the world? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what are you thinking about the monks? Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And Murgaman4 over and out. I'll see you guys later.